Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and this will be our last live show for the year. We will have a show tomorrow. I'll get into that just a second, but this is our last live show of 2020. It's been a very exciting year for Elevate Your Grind. We've done over 100 episodes. This has been one of my favorite experiences this year to help come into your living rooms, your cars, your offices, wherever you happen to listen to this podcast, and help you educate yourself on the amazing cannabis industry. I hope that anybody out there was able to take a look at this podcast, learn something, and really have a new view on what cannabis means to this country and to this world and how they can participate in it. So as always, we have an awesome guest for you today. I'm excited to speak to our guest because he's starting to innovate and think outside the box, starting to look at different ways to make it easier on people, right? And it's a category that I'm actually a little less familiar with. So I'm excited to learn a little bit about it today. Of course, we've always got to tell you what's coming up. February 6th, I was going to say first annual. That is not even remotely close to being true. But February 6th, we have our annual C-Lab conference down at the Sacred Space in Miami, Florida. It will be socially distant. Masks will be required, but there's going to be an online component. So if you're in the state of Florida, we'd love you to come down and join us. You can get your tickets at joinclab.com. If you are outside of the state of Florida and you want to come hang out with us, there's going to be an online component. Candidly, I don't know much about that yet. I know we're going to be broadcasting it, but check out joinclab.com for more details on that. Of course, if you want to check out last week's episodes of Elevate Your Grind, find those at youtube.com/elevate your grind. We've got probably about 104, 105 episodes there already. And then tomorrow, I invited two of my good friends, Emily and Morgan Paxia, and we filmed a nice 2020 year in review for you. So check that out. We're going to premiere that right on our Facebook page at 4:20 p.m. tomorrow. That's going to be our 2020 year in review. And we'll wish everybody a happy new year and be done for the year. All right. On that note, my guest today, he's got an awesome invention that I'm really looking forward to talking more about. It's in a category that I'm a little bit more unfamiliar with, so I'm really excited to educate myself. But on top of that, his background as an entrepreneur is absolutely incredible. I've listened to a few interviews and just hearing the diversity of it, it's really cool to hear the stories of the people that we have in cannabis, because there's so many different backgrounds and so many different paths that get people here. So on that note, please welcome I would say, founder and CEO, although it pops out of another company, and we'll get into that as well. But the founder and CEO of Ammonite, Mike McDonald, which is the parent company of the Dablicator. So, Mike, I'm really excited to learn about this. Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thanks, Todd, man. I'm excited to be on. We have all been really impressed with what you've been doing over the last year. So congratulations to you.
Thank you very much, man. That means a lot. We did our first episode on January 28th, and I really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. The fact that we have people watching the show outside of Florida means the world. But, the focus is not on me today. The focus will be a little bit more on you and the conversation that we're going to have. Let's start. Sometimes I like to do things backwards. I like to start at the end and go to the beginning. So you created this thing called the Dablicator, and, going on the website, as someone who is not an oil consumer yet, and I will caveat, we'll call that yet, as it looks like for someone like me, an awesome entry-level device, CPG product, whatever you want to call it, to bring an outsider into the world of oil, because there's so many different use cases for it. And what it does is something that this industry is working towards, almost standardizes a dose, if you will. So give us the high-level overview. What gave you the thought of this? Tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll, like any good movie where they start with, the heist, and then they go back 2 years and plan it, we'll go back to your background there. So let's start with the Dablicator itself.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I didn't invent it. I joined a group of really, really innovative guys that started a company called Jetty Extracts back in 2013, back in the pre-adult legalization days. And they're now one of the biggest, because I'm still part of Jetty, one of the largest cannabis brands in California, focused mostly on extracts and vape and concentrates. And they invented the Dablicator. It's called Dablicator Oil Applicator, really out of a need for patients that were needing precise doses of their medicine. These particular patients generally weren't able to vape or smoke because of Many of them had cancer, and there's sort of a sideline component to the story where Jetty invented or started this nonprofit called the Shelter Project, which provided free cannabis to cancer patients. So you've got this group of consumers that are medical patients primarily. They're using syringes, kind of sketchy looking syringes that leak and, you know, basically look sketchy. And they're also cancer patients that certainly can't smoke, and they're needing cannabis and medicine to help with their appetite after chemo and so forth. So the Jetty team said, man, we can do something better than these syringes. They actually had a friend that had brain cancer, and he wasn't eating, and they started bringing him oil, and it worked. And then they decided that there's a better way to deliver cannabis in an oil factor. So that's the genesis of it back in 2014, 2015. And it has several iterations, but it really became the sort of easiest, most approachable, precise dosable oil applicator on the market. And until now, it was only available as a Jetty product in California. And I'll get into, you know, what we're doing now, but that's sort of the genesis of the product. It was sort of out of a need for a better oil applicator primarily for the medical market. And now it's actually branched out very much into the adult use side of things as well.
Very cool, man. Well, I want to talk about the product itself because I agree with you. Those syringes are really interesting, right? And especially down here in Florida, it was one of our first introductions into medical cannabis because we didn't allow smokable flower. But, you know, when you look at it, it's a highly concentrated product. So therefore, you pay a good amount of money for a little bit of product. And I got to be honest, you know, I don't want a shaky hand to make me lose half my syringe or over apply or anything else like that, which is where I can see the dabblicator coming in. But like I said, you know, with any good movie, this is where the record scratches and we rewind to planning the heist, right? It's really interesting. Now, I want to follow your journey into the cannabis space because, you know, I was watching another podcast that you did, and a lot of your early entrepreneurship was over in Asia, if I'm correct.
Right. Yeah. I grew up on the East Coast. I'm from Philadelphia, went to school back in Pennsylvania, and I was always hustling. I mean, I had to pay my way through college, and you know, in turn became an entrepreneur, which I didn't even know what that was back in the day. You know, always hustled, had a hot dog cart business, a carpet business, and just, you know, we ran spring break trips down to Florida, as you could probably appreciate.
I can. So I was listening to the early hustle, man. I love hearing that story, coordinating. So another awesome cannabis entrepreneur, Carson Humiston of Banks, she did the same thing, the spring break trip. So I give you so much credit to recognize, hey, everyone's going to go on spring break. If we plan it, because college kids are idiots and they don't plan anything. I know, being a former college kid, right? We can either A, pay for our trip, or B, make some money off that. So that's how I can tell that like the entrepreneur bug hit me late in life, because I wasn't even remotely thinking like, oh, let's try to monetize things we'd be doing anyway.
Right.
Not to interrupt you, but go on, man.
No, that's right. I mean, you know, I got the idea because I started renting buses to get people home at Thanksgiving. You know, half of them, I went to Penn State in the middle of the state. So half of them would go to Philly, half of them would go to Pittsburgh. And everybody was taking Greyhounds, this and that. I said, man, if I buy a bus with 60 seats and I sell 40, you know, so always shit like that. And then the spring break thing happened as well. And, you know, these kids were all making their own deals. And so I would rent buses, and it was super fun. Initially, it was just get a free trip, and then it turned into making some money. So, you know, that's just an example of some of the stuff I kind of had to do. I didn't, again, consider myself a hustler, but looking back on it, yeah, I think that sort of set my my DNA in this direction.
Very cool, man. No, that's an awesome story. So what brought you to Asia? If I remember correctly, you had studied a little bit in school at Penn State, but to actually go over there and execute and to work with companies, I mean, you know, especially not to call out age here, but in pre-internet days, without having the information, without being able to kind of access different things and to me would give me extreme amounts of anxiety that I'd probably need to buy a Dablicator probably for. But what gave you the confidence and really the motivation to go over there and begin your but continue your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, it's funny. It came out of not wanting to go work for Johnson & Johnson right out of college. Like all my buddies were like in marketing programs and they were all going to work for Procter & Gamble. And I was just like, man, that sounds like the worst thing in the world for me. And I knew if I just got out of that cycle, at least for a couple of years, it would hopefully at a minimum give me a breather and help me reassess what I wanted to do. But I had a feeling that, at the time, I mean, I'm happy to talk about my age. I mean, I'm 55 years old. So, right. So this is the late 80s and China was blowing up and, Mandarin Chinese was going to become, the second language of the world. And I said, well, why don't I go learn Mandarin and kind of figure out what I can do over there to, make some money and hustle and learn Mandarin Chinese. So I went to Taiwan. I bought a one-way ticket because that's all I could afford. I figured I'd figure out a way to get out of there. I signed up for a small university language class, so I at least had a place to land. And then I just started living, and I ended up hooking up. I was teaching English and doing a bunch of things to make the ends meet. Started meeting a bunch of really cool expatriates over there, and I landed a job with a bicycle company just because they needed somebody to help with some translation. Not so much Chinese to English and English to Chinese, but we used fax machines back then. So there would be communications coming over from the US. The company's called Giant Bicycle, now the largest bicycle brand in the world.
Yeah.
But at the time, they were just making white label products for Schwinn and Specialized. So I became this guy that was just the only American in the whole company helping translate documents coming back and forth and making sure that their responses weren't totally off wire. And I did that for a couple of years, and I really that sort of propelled me into the hard goods business, manufacturing, product design, inside of fast forwarding, brought me all the way up to being in a manufacturing and a products business such as Jetty and then Dablicator. But I spent several years in Asia, moved back to the States, ended up in California, did a lot of business back and forth, started a few other companies, participated in early stage of a ski related company, akin to the bicycle business. I mean, we helped launch Giant Bicycle, spun out to a few other things. And my big break, if you will, where I made some real dough was a company that was in the ski business that we ended up selling to K2 Sports, publicly traded company, back in early 2000s. And that kind of gave me a little bit of a stake to breathe and start doing some other fun things that actually involved real estate development, and that begot a little bit more success and so forth.
Very cool. I want to stop you there a second because it's really interesting. You're actually the second person in the cannabis industry, especially with a prominent position, that I've spoke to in the past 2 weeks that was a part of Giant Bicycles. I'm not sure if you know the other person that I'm speaking of, but the CMO of Candescent, Sam Ariano,
right,
was the head of global marketing for Giant as well. I'm assuming your time did not overlap there.
No, I actually watched that podcast, and I thought that was interesting. No, and we should chat. I don't know him, but I'm sure we know a lot of the same characters. He participated in really blowing up Giant as a major brand. I was on the front end of what if we started our own brand instead of doing all the white label for these other guys, because that was really the future. And I helped do that. I certainly wasn't the head of any of that, but because of my English capabilities and my American business sensibilities, I got to be in a front row seat of launching the Giant brand in US, Europe, Asia. And it was pretty cool. And I followed how big it's gotten, but I haven't stayed in touch with many of the folks. But it would be interesting to connect up with him and share some stories.
Yeah, we'll see if we can make that introduction. That'd be really cool. I mean, I can certainly take this on a tangent because I can tell you, so since the pandemic started And just like everybody else, you know, I started biking, and down here in Florida, we don't have mountains, but I've been doing a road bike. I've had it for a while, so it's something I've done in the past. But I found there is an awesome mountain bike trail right by my house. So I would totally be getting into mountain biking right now if it wasn't for the fact that bicycles are basically sold out for the foreseeable future. So I might have to get you to open up that old Rolodex to see if we can get some direct from factory. But we'll go back to the main story. So you get to Colorado, and you know you're in the snowshoe business, which is really interesting. It was in California.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I assumed Colorado.
San Francisco, if you can believe. I spent a hell of a lot of time in Colorado, but the company was founded at Stanford University as a graduate thesis project, and the founder was from San Francisco. So we just set up a factory in the Mission District and went to town. But it was kind of interesting that we tested our snowshoes on the streets of California or San Francisco and the beach just to get wear and tear. You know, during QA, QC.
I can only imagine the other beachgoers watching you guys walk with these snowshoes down the beach and what that was like.
I ended up in California, moved up to the Bay Area. I had gotten bitten by the manufacturing bug, hard goods, right? I tried a little software, I tried a little this and that, but I really found myself just passionate about designing, making, and taking hard good products to market. Bicycles, we had camping equipment, and then this company needed somebody to come on and help really grow it. So I connected up with the founder and I just jumped in, and you know, it took us from just under $1 million to $10 million in 4 years in a relatively niche category, right? Snowshoes. But we ended up. And the parallel, we can jump back and forth, but the parallel to Dablicator is very niche market, but we actually invented the market in a lot of ways. We used to say we didn't sell snowshoes, we sold snowshoeing. So we started turning people on like you and people that really enjoyed snow sports, but weren't hardcore skiers, weren't hardcore snowboarders, but we're going to resorts and we're looking for some, or even back trails, we're looking for some exercise, a little lower impact. And we sort of built the category while we built the business, which is a lot like what I'm doing now with Dablicator, oil applicator, which we can chat about in a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to see someone so focused on a niche product, right? Because I come from the finance world, and a niche product, when you look at it, it's either going to be a home run or it's going to be a failure for the most part, you know, because you're targeting you have a super targeted market. Now, my own personal opinion, and it's mainly because I'm probably lazier and enjoy skiing, I think the Dablicator is going to be bigger than the snowshoe company because I think it really solves so many different problems. And I'm sure you agree, considering it's, you know, what you're doing full time now. But yeah, let's talk about the product, right? So as most people, and especially people outside of the industry, outside of cannabis, when they look at cannabis, right, they think flower. And nowadays we can talk about vape pens as well too. So for the average cannabis consumer, and we won't say California has a different level of education than anybody else, but you know, for us folks here in Florida and some of the more up and coming markets, or just the general public that we're pulling into our industry, oils are foreign, waxes, shot, all that's foreign, right? Except for buying a vape pen. But I can tell you, if you showed someone a package of oil or an RSO syringe, they wouldn't equate that to being the same thing that's in the vape pen, right? Where I see your product being so valuable is the ease of use, and then the standard dose, right? That syringe, the dosing is how much pressure you're putting on that plunger, right? So I would love to hear, you know, your thoughts on this project, really the intentions behind it. Is it a product that is intended to bring a bigger audience into the oil market for cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about the market, and then we could talk about the solution, which we think is really unique. So the market itself, I alluded to earlier, it started out as a medical patient market, people that really, and this is a Dablicator, by the way, right? So it kind of looks like, you know, it's got a heat resistant tip. It takes like a pen. You spin it and it gets a plunger. that comes out the back, and then you can back it off, which you can't do with a syringe. And we can talk a little bit more about the mechanics in a bit, but so there was a use for it in the medical market to essentially replace syringes, which are, you know, they would get clogged depending on the viscosity of the oil. You couldn't get all the oil out of them. They could leak. You certainly can't back them up. You know, yeah, it's like having a live syringe. Like, where are you going to store it? It's not like you throw it in your
literally
backpack,
couldn't
right?
put the oil back in the container, the old toothpaste analogy, right?
Yeah, right. So this was a better product, we thought, and we developed it and patented it and really had it focused on the medical market initially. And that's still a big part of the business, especially outside of places like California, right? Like in Florida, you've got medical, even though a large component of the medical market is, of course, adult use, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, RSOs and, thicker live resins, even distillates. So like at Certera, I'm sure you're familiar with the Certera stores in California.
Very.
They're selling their pure oil in a dabblicator. They also sell some oil in a syringe. It's a little cheaper because of the hardware component. But so as the medical market really grabbed onto utilizing cannabis sort of sublingually in food and drink, the syringes did what they did, and Dabblicator sort of took a chunk out of that business as people started to figure out that it was a better product. Honestly, where the biggest growth we're seeing is in the concentrates market, which is one of the fastest growing components to cannabis. You've got flower, you've got vape, and then the whole concentrates, the waxes and the shatters, and the liquid resins and so forth are becoming a big part of it. You're familiar with the Puffco Peak, right? And you're familiar with some of the products by G-Pen, which are dab on the go. You're familiar with dab rigs in general, right? Big part of Colorado, huge part of what's going on in California. And we've seen Colorado and California trends rolling out throughout the rest of the country, right? So if you can imagine, forget about the medical side. I think we've kind of covered that. Dabblicator makes tons of sense for the medical side. Precise dosing, it doesn't leak. You can get all your product out of it. You can back up the plunger and so forth. It's convenient. It's easy. But imagine on the adult use side when people are dabbing now. I mean, like there's a huge amount of that going on. The current way that you dab is you got a jar, you got a dental pick, you got a blowtorch. I mean, talk about sketchy, right? Like, a certain part of that is a ritual, and that's amazing. And the real headers just love that whole process. But what Dabblicator's done in that process is you can dab directly onto your nail because you've got a heat resistant tip. You dab right on there and you're done. You don't need the dental pick and the whole thing. The portable dab hardware business is a whole nother thing. If you look at G-Pen's new Roam, for example, I mean, you got a fully self-contained dab rig that you can throw in your pocket on the ski lift. You throw a Dabblicator in there and you're dabbing on the way up on the ski lift. You're certainly not pulling out your wax and your shatter from a glass jar and a dental pick, right?
No.
So and then there's the application on flower and dosing or twaxing a joint or adding CBD or additional THC oil to your flower. One of the fastest growing components of the California market right now is the infused pre-roll business. As if it's kind of hilarious, like as if 25% THC bud wasn't enough. Let's add power to the flower, right? So folks are already rolling keef and hash and different things into their joints. There's a whole trend towards pre-rolls. So Dabblicator again is this way to dose up a joint, dose up your flower, dab it directly, take it sublingually, add it to food. And when I say Dabblicator, sort of oil in general, because you could certainly use a syringe for all of those things. So what you're seeing is this continued need in the growth on the medical side with regards to direct application of oil. And now you're seeing a significant opportunity in the adult use side as well. And all Dabblicator is an alternative to participating in those opportunities, if you will.
But on that note, I consider it a better mousetrap, but not even a better mousetrap. So far, it's one of the best mousetraps, right? I mean, I'm sure I could write my notes every day with a paintbrush, but a pen is certainly a whole lot easier, right? So going back to what you said, that you can leverage the syringe for all those activities too. I mean, yeah, you could, but you could also have the oil come out like a fire hose and be way too much.
Right.
And then, like we said, the oil is out of the case. You're not going to be able to put it back in. Where Dablicator lets you get just the amount that you want, especially going back to your scenario, ski lift, right? You got gloves on, you've got a thick jacket, you've got whatever you've got, and your product makes it easier to put it on something. I can tell you, one of the things my friends and I really like is we discovered dog walkers for the first time out in Colorado on the ski lifts. A funny story about this. I had a really good friend. It was our second time ever going out to Colorado, and we were going in to buy pre-rolls. And of course, we were younger at the time, so we were much more in the high THC, how much can we consume mindset. So gram joints were what we were going for. The bud tender is like, hey, a lot of people like these little ones because they're good for the lifts. I had a friend who was so disgusted that she recommended a little joint to him that he walked away. Well, long story short, we bought a bunch of them. And by the end of the trip, they were one of our favorite things ever because they're snack size. And we would go and we'd smoke them on the lift and then go for another run. And, if you want to take it to the next step, with your product, you could infuse the little pre-rolls. You could just take the oil yourself. A lot of people flasks on a ski lift are not out of the question. You can infuse, I know it's not recommended, but you can infuse alcohol. You can infuse your coffee or anything else. I can see, early in the morning, throwing one of those in your ski jacket pocket and having multiple uses for it throughout the day. And then when you get to après ski, really going hard with it. So it's, you did something I think is going to bring a lot of the general public into the dabbing community. You talk about the rigs and everything else like that. I just recently got educated on that. It's not portable, even though people will bring them everywhere else. I look on your website and I see the use cases. I mean, I think it's the G Pen Connect, just touching it right to the end there. It's really incredible. So Jetty, what you guys started this within Jetty. Why is the company spun off on its own now? Let's talk about that.
So as I mentioned earlier, the team at Jetty invented it really initially for a cancer patient friend of theirs. And then like, this has got some legs with the cancer program, the shelter project, where we've given away over $1 million worth of cannabis for free to cancer patients in California. And a lot of the form factor in which we gave it away was Dablicator for some of the reasons I spoke about earlier. So Jetty was just really focused on building a brand and building a company. And Dablicator was one component of it. Vape carts, concentrates, and Dablicator wasn't a huge part of the business, but frankly, wasn't a lot of focus on it as we grew the business because vape was the big thing that was exploding, right? But over the course of a couple of years, we started getting inquiries from other brands around the world saying, hey man, we really dig your Dablicator. Could you sell us some and put our logo on it? And we were like, yeah, sure, man, cool. We were just selling them Dablicators and putting their logos on it, not doing a whole lot of due diligence around who they were and so forth. And one of the large multi-state operators recently ordered 100,000 units from us. And that's when I said, wait a second, this is a really interesting thing. So I dug in a little bit and realized that there was this big opportunity beyond just Jetty for sure in California, and that there really was a need for a better mousetrap. And so a little more research, and then I decided with my team, I said, look, why don't we take the Dablicator or Dablicator oil applicator and turn it into a platform, not unlike, you're familiar with PAX?
Yeah, very familiar.
Yeah.
I think there's one
PAX
right off camera.
Yeah, and Emily and Morgan are one of the original investors in PAX. We know those guys well, by the way.
I always joked. I wonder if they named because their last name is Paxia. I never asked them that question.
So PAX and Jetty, by the way, is the largest PAX partner in the world, largest PAX brand partner in the world. So we knew quite a bit about the PAX platform. The idea that you go out and you pick quality brand partners, you put them on the platform, which is Dabblicator Oil Applicator, support them with R&D, support them with fill and assembly, standard operating procedures, marketing, and really put the best of the best in the markets and say, introduce your extracts that are already in vape pens, or already in tinctures, maybe already in syringes, and put them on the Dabblicator platform. Automatically, you have 6, 8, 10 new SKUs to offer your customers overnight. We'll provide turnkey, we'll print it for you, we'll give you packaging. All you got to do is order it. 6 weeks later, we deliver you a turnkey program. You fill it, you put it to market. Very much like the PAX program. It's a closed loop system, so it's no one's going to compete with you with this type of a product if you're one of the partners. It's turnkey. What do you say? And we try that. We talked to several of our buddies out there in the industry, and they're like, "That's killer. Let's do it." So that prompted me to say, well, we can't. It doesn't make sense to do it really inside a plant touching company. And you're familiar with all the tax burdens that are associated with touching cannabis from a federal level. So let's spin it off into its own business unit. It's now akin to a bicycle business, right? You make a product, you sell it, you write off all your expenses, you can do a lot of things. You can share some of the resources from the plant touching business that we do share, and they're write-offable where otherwise they wouldn't be.
Yeah.
It gets us out. It gets the Dabblicator and to a certain extent the Jetty brand out beyond California, where there are investors and partners that we're always connecting with. But it ultimately, like, let's run this little business unit for it on its own and see what we can do with it. And thus far, we really actually just launched it in August as a platform. And we've already signed up 710 Labs, who you might be familiar with. They're like the OG. And I actually have a 710 Labs. We just shipped their first. This is kind of cool. You got to check this out. So it's, fully customized 710 product.
That's awesome.
We've got a Certera's on the program. We've got several others coming on. So we saw that there was a real opportunity, and I just said, let's go. Let's just go out and aggressively talk to the real premium brands out there in the world and educate them. To your point, like, there was a lot of education. They're like, what? Like,
yeah, we
sell flower and vape. Like, yeah, we sell some concentrates. So I'm like, look, man, this is a freight train coming. Oil application for use as edibles, for uses in drinks, for dosing, for direct dabbing. Why don't you guys get ahead of the curve? And that's what we've been doing. And we've had a huge amount of interest. We're starting to sign up key partners, and I anticipate 2021 to just be like a massive inflow of inquiries, such that we're going to have to really get picky on who we bring on board. So you can kind of see the kinship to, you understand the PAX platform analogy, and that's what we're doing.
So nothing against PAX, great platform and everything else, but the one nice thing about your platform that's a little bit different from PAX or G-Pen or V-Fire even is I don't have to make the conscious decision to buy another accessory, right? Yeah. I remember for the longest time, I wasn't against PAX, but I wasn't trying it because I had a shit ton of 510 cart or thread carts, right? So I would have to, not only would I have to buy the pod, but I have to buy the $35 battery. That happened again with me. I don't know, for those of you familiar with the Florida market, Trulieve has their True Sticks, which are V-Fires, right? And that was another one where I had tried somebody's True Pod. It was amazing, but to make another $35 purchase of a battery wasn't appealing with you. There is nothing else that comes with the Dabblicator. It's the Dabblicator and the oil is already inside of it. So you don't have to make the conscious decision to make two purchases versus just the purchase of the oil that happens to be coming in the Dabblicator. Maybe there's a little bit of a premium on that because it's a better platform. But I can tell you, just speaking with you and learning about how that works, to someone like me who's not familiar with it, I would definitely pay that premium for the ease of use, right? So And kind of on that note, you mentioned a little bit with education. This is a new platform, and with any new, well, with A and cannabis in general, there needs to be a level of education because there is a lot of people. There are a lot of people that we're pulling into this industry that don't know anything about cannabis, and certainly are not familiar with the oil and the concentrates market. That is probably newer. You know, most people weren't getting that type of stuff from their guy when they were black market buyers or anything else like that. How do you handle the education process? And is it two-pronged for you? Do you have to educate people both on the concentrate market and the dablicator, or do you find that people are educated enough on concentrates that they can understand it?
Well, before I jump into that, I wanted to just make one comment about when you talked about packs and the closed loop systems where you got to buy a battery for this, battery for that. From a business model perspective, appreciate this, right? It's kind of like what makes our business model, I think, really interesting. We have a closed loop system, but we also have essentially no competition other than a syringe, right? It's as if PAX invented the only vape pen, right? So right now we have this first mover advantage with a real stylized oil application device. So we've got a huge head start on something that's better than a syringe.
And it's patented, right?
Yeah, it's patented, and we have more patents coming. We've got, I can't talk about it, but we have some killer, interesting add-ons to it that are coming down the pike in 2021.
Well, you'll come back when you can talk about them for sure. We'll schedule that.
Yeah, for sure. And then also we'll jump into the education thing in a second, but think about this also. You're a cannabis company, you can only grow so big or then you got to just start to jump to other states. What coming up with a hardware and intellectual property product allows you to do is scale and diversify your risk, right? So, and we can go national, international without any constraints with licensing and federal regulations. So from a business perspective, there's all those things that made the Dablicator oil applicator really interesting to pursue. With regards to education, it's unique. I mean, the easiest targets, if you will, are folks that understand that concentrates and dabbing is becoming a big thing, or just that they're already selling a bunch of syringes because it's a medical focused market. And if I can get through to, frankly, even a product management level person and say, hey man, how are your syringes doing? They're like, oh, we sell a ton of them, but they're a pain in the butt. They leak, they this, they that. I said, well, check this product out. It can solve those problems for you. Or a customer that is selling a ton of vape, but hasn't necessarily got into the concentrates or the dabbables market yet. We're able to say, hey, you could take your existing product. You don't even have to invent anything new per se. I mean, you can eventually, and just take the exact same product you're putting into your vape pens and your syringes and add it to Dablicator, and you've just increased your offerings to your consumers overnight. And by the way, you don't need any new equipment. You don't need any new know-how. You basically use same equipment you're using. In other words, if you can fill a vape cart, you can fill a Dablicator. So it's really just my biggest challenge, and it's, is in one of the reasons I signed up with the team from Matteo, is education and just socializing the idea that there is a better mousetrap out there, that it's not only better from what exists, but it represents how big the opportunity is in this segment of oil application in the market.
Very cool. Well, you see me looking over to the side here, and it's for very selfish purposes, right? You had mentioned that you signed up Certera as a partner, so I had to see. I only heard you talk about California, so I'm sitting here thinking, all right, I'm going to have to talk them into sending them to Florida, but I just looked up my beautiful Delray Beach store right here, and they seem to have, they're selling oils in the Dablicator, so I'm a very happy cancer. We literally just avoided an awkward conversation, me trying to talk you into moving your business to Florida faster. So I'm very glad to see that.
Well, we do. We actually make Dablicator. I can send you some. We make Dablicator in Jetty CBD, which is kind of a thing we didn't really talk about. Ammonite also owns the Jetty CBD business, which I sell primarily through Green Lane, which I'm sure you're familiar with Green Lane. They're the largest head shop and vape shop distributor in the world.
Very
And that was
familiar.
another reason why we thought we were onto something. We were at some of these head shop shows. People were digging our CBD at the Green Lane booth, but most people are saying, "What's that device, man? That's super cool. Like, we dig your CBD, but there's so many CBD products out there, but nothing like that device." And that was where another way we're like, I think we're onto something. But yeah, you can get the pure oil, which is a distillate, which is a nice high quality distillate. You can get that in Dablicator format from Soterra and in all 50 plus of their stores.
Very cool. Well, it's funny because the Green Lane headquarters is probably about 12 minutes from my house right now. So,
Yep.
you know,
Good people,
yeah,
man. I love those guys.
great.
They're super cool, really professional. Big fan.
Yeah, I actually just started talking to a lot of the guys there. Aaron, funny enough, I went to high school with Aaron Lacasio.
Oh, right on. Right on.
Yeah, I went to high school with Aaron, and we share the same barber, funny enough. But I just recently got introduced to Eric Hammond there, and he's a great dude. We're probably going to have him on the show as well.
He's amazing. He's a good buddy of mine. He is smart. He's one of the most educated guys in the business. He's got a fascinating story. So I hope you get him on. And when you do, tell him Mike McD said hello.
Absolutely. Not to call him out on this, because if anybody does a Zoom call, have you done a Zoom call with him this year at all?
I haven't.
So
Why?
when he logs in, he has an entire wall of bongs behind him in his home office. And he just recently had a kid who's about the same age as mine. And it's funny, we were talking about how we have to lock our offices to keep our kids out of them and everything else. For him, it's really just a safety hazard with glass. Clearly, his kid's
Right.
not going to know what they are, but it was a really funny conversation. So hopefully he doesn't mind me sharing that, but every time he logs into a Zoom call, it's behind him. So
that's awesome. Well, he's developed an incredible line of glass, and their business model is really innovative. So yeah, he's great. There's Kamal Korea is an amazing dude there. There's a bunch of really cool dudes, but I think Eric would be an excellent guest.
very cool. Well, I'm hoping, because Eric lives in the same city that I do, that we haven't done an in-person episode since March 11th. So I would absolutely love to actually sit across the table from someone and do this. So I'll probably do that. And if I ever get back out to California, we can do hundreds of them. But we'll see when travel opens back up. So kind of getting back to it, man, I'm a fan. Like, Liz, I am a fan. We had Rebecca Allison from Soterra on here. Becca Allison, as she likes to be called. And I told her that I owe her a visit to Soterra because I haven't been there in a while. And I'm very impressed with the changes that they've made in the past year or so. So unfortunately, my medical card expired. I'm waiting on the new one, but I am certainly going to be heading to Soterra. And, I know it's not your oil, but certainly checking out the tool. I mean, just the view of putting it in your coffee in the morning, to me right there, you sold me. So I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, and remember, that's the cool thing about the platform. It's, other than the CBD, it's never our oil, right? It's a vessel for your oil, and part of what we do is we support you guys and say, hey, some of our customers in California are doing this incredible RSO product. It could be good for you. And but yeah, I've had Soterra's product that's in that Dablicator, and it's nice. And I might know a guy who knows a guy to just make sure you get a chance to try this product sooner rather than later.
Very cool, man. Well, I appreciate that. And, I'm sure. So the CBD, honestly, not to throw that aside, CBD is obviously a huge market, and there's a lot of people that are leveraging it as a nutraceutical. Again, going back to just the use cases for your tool, I can see that being just as useful in the CBD market because, again, putting it on food, just taking it directly from the Dablicator itself, when putting it into coffee, beverages, putting CBD, like you said, on a regular joint and just adding CBD to it. Listen, folks, I won't back this up officially because I haven't seen any great studies, but there's a lot of research that's been done that talks about CBD's effectiveness on the coronavirus and helping prevent it. I won't say that I officially endorse it, but I'm certainly willing to try.
I mean, look, this is what I do most nights. I take a Dablicator, put my finger out, a little drop on there, about 55 milligrams, maybe each click is 55 milligrams, like this. Easy. Awesome.
That looked way too hard. Wait, that's too
And
much.
yeah, and it, depending on what the flavor is, like Jetty CBD, we've got Maui Wowie, we've got what are we selling? What's in the market right now? Granddaddy Perps, Maui Wowie, and ACDC, right? And the Jetty terping side of things, they're experts. I mean, Nate Ferguson is just, in my opinion, one of the founders of Jetty and one of the most innovative and experienced extract guys in the business. But yeah, I mean, how easy is this? Even with the THC, don't. And it doesn't have to go through your liver, so it's much faster. It's got much faster efficacy. If you eat a gummy bear, how long is that going to take you? And but on the CBD side, it chills me out. I go to sleep. It might only have 1 or 2 beers instead of 4. It's got a lot of applications, man. I think you're right. I think it's kind of a snowball. This whole concept of adding oil to your food, to your drinks, to your joints, it's going. Like I said, it's a freight train that's happening. So what we are is it's like the gold rush. We're the picks and shovels of the gold rush. We're providing an application device, a tool that sort of takes advantage of and provides that better mousetrap for what is this market that's really exploding.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I can tell you as somebody who's not a concentrate, not an extracts person. Funny enough, actually, somebody who used to work from Greenlane's calling me right now. I'm gonna have to call him back, but they might be watching the show. Luckily, it's not Eric. But for someone who is not an oil consumer, this changes the game for me, and it would get me interested in it because it adds a whole lot of versatility to it. And let's be honest, it helps with public consumption as well too. You're not going out to a restaurant or going out to a public place and smoking a joint. It's just not going to happen, right? It's way too invasive. Right. Vape pens are great. They don't smell as much, but there's still the cloud of smoke that you leave behind. So you're not sitting outside of the restaurant with your family. You're walking away, taking a hit, going to the bathroom, doing something like that. With this, you just stay in the conversation. You put it on the bread when it comes to the table. You put it directly into your mouth. And for those of us that would much rather consume cannabis than alcohol, I think it's a great product to really bring it on the go with you, and with the diversity of use cases. I'm very excited to try it. So I know we're getting towards the top of the hour. I actually have another call after this, funny enough. But what can we look forward to seeing from you guys next year that you are able to share? I know you said you're talking about a whole lot of accessories and add-ons, but as far as the things you're able to share with us, what can we look forward to you guys in 2021?
Well, I think the main focus for me is just hopefully what you'll look forward to is there'll be 20 to 25 key high-end brands on the platform by the end of 2021. I mean, that's my biggest focus. Some of the R&D we have going on, I can't speak about, but I think that's even going to be bigger than this disposable Dablicator product. But my goal is when we're sitting here next year at this time is to be sharing 20 stories instead of 5 with you about A, how big the market's become, and B, how successful our partners have become. So I think what you'll see if our predictions are correct and what you're feeling as well is that this whole oil application, dabbing, sublingual trend in cannabis use is going to just continue to get bigger. And, Dablicator is going to sort of ride the wave with that as the best way to accomplish that.
Yeah, man. I certainly see this as being a very preferred consumption method for public consumption, especially for people who are not smokers. And let's be honest, in the country, in the general public, that's the majority group, right? And when cannabis reaches critical mass and it's federally legal, that group is going to outnumber the rest of us who smoke it. So I think you're definitely looking towards the future, man. Before we let you go, let's get the plugs out there. Where can we find you? Where can people log on to find the product?
Best place is to go to dablicator.com. From there, you can get all the information on the brand partner program. There's a couple of cool videos on there that show how it's filled and how it's assembled. And then there's a form on there. If you're interested in becoming a partner, fill it out and shoot it to us, and we'll get back to you quickly. Go to jettyextracts.com as well if you want to check out a little bit of the story on on sort of the crew that invented this product.
Very cool, man. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, man.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody at home. Second to last episode, live episode before the end of the year. I want to thank everybody for tuning in each and every day. It's been a hell of a journey. And of course, join us tomorrow at 4:20 p.m. for our 2020 year in review with Morgan and Emily Paxia. You can find that facebook.com/Cannabis Group. I might log in. If you have any questions for me, you want to ask me directly, just shoot them in the comments and we'll see if I answer them. But until then, folks, this is Elevate Your Grind signing off for the year, and we'll see you in 2021.